Hi, I'm Jake, 32, and last month my life blew up when I found out my sister and mother shredded my grandmother's final will and tried to sell her house out from under me. They thought I wouldn't find out. They thought they could just quietly list the house and split the profits like Grandma Dorothy hadn't told me, on more than one occasion, that the house would be mine. And I might have believed them, might have accepted it, if I hadn't stumbled across a copy of that final will hidden in a photo album while I was clearing out her attic alone, in 90-degree heat, sweating and crying and wondering why they hadn't even waited a full month after the funeral. I'm getting ahead of myself. It started on Christmas Day. My mom had just passed the mashed potatoes with a smug little smirk when she dropped the bomb. "We finally sold Grandma's house," she said, like it was just another update about the weather. "You were never in the will anyway." My sister laughed, that high, clipped laugh she uses when she thinks she's won. Good. She'd have just wasted it. I didn't flinch. I didn't yell. I just sipped my wine and said calm as ice, "Cool. Hope you enjoy the cash since I'm the one who bought it." Silence. Utter, glorious silence. Victoria choked on her cranberry sauce. Mom dropped her fork. My dad blinked like I'd slapped him. And maybe I had. Maybe they needed it. "What did you just say?" Mom asked, voice tight, eyes narrowing. "I said I bought the house." I looked her dead in the eye. "Through an LLC. Sterling Properties. Closed last week." Victoria's jaw actually dropped. "You're lying." I pulled out my phone. "Would you like to see the paperwork?" She didn't. But I showed it anyway. Email from the realtor. Closing documents. Timestamped. Sealed. "I overbid by 10 grand to make sure you take it," I added. "Realtor said you were motivated sellers." That was putting it lightly. They were practically begging to offload the house. Too many repairs, too many memories they didn't care to honor. I'd watched the listing like a hawk. The moment it dropped, I was ready. "You don't have that kind of money," Victoria hissed. I smiled. "Sure I do. Startup equity pays well when the company goes public. I sold my shares and kept quiet." Funny what you can afford when people think you're broke. Mom's face paled. "This is some kind of joke." "Nope. And you know what else? I found the real will. The one where Grandma left the house to me. That shut them up real fast. They'd found it too. I knew that now. I had the footage. Security camera Grandma had hidden behind one of her bird paintings, a blue jay. Just like she told me in one of our last conversations, cryptic and whispered through a haze of medication. "Look for the birds, sweetheart. Always look for the birds." And when I did, I found everything. Them in the study. Pulling out the envelope. Reading the will. Arguing. Shredding it. Page by page. And they thought they'd gotten away with it. But they forgot who raised me. Who taught me how to think long term. How to fight quiet wars with loud results. Grandma didn't raise a fool. She raised me. And I came to collect what was mine. You ever watch two people realize, in real time, that the person they thought was harmless just checkmated them? That's what happened at that dinner table. Victoria was the first to recover. Of course she was. She's always been the fighter. The golden girl with the law degree and a temper sharper than her manicure. "This is fraud," she snapped. "You manipulated Mom during her grief, you tricked us into selling." "Victoria," I said quietly but firmly, "you put the house on the market. I made an offer. You accepted. The sale was processed legally. Everything's above board." Mom's voice came next, brittle and uneven. "Your grandmother was senile. She didn't know what she was saying near the end." "March 2019. I replied. "That's when she signed the will. Witnessed, notarized, and filed with her lawyer. She was sharper than you'll ever be. I hadn't meant for it to sting. But it did. I could see it. I could feel it." Dad sat frozen, his fork still hovering over a piece of dry turkey, like the laws of time had broken around him. "She told me the house would be mine," I said, my voice steady. "When I was 16. Sitting on the porch after you forgot to pick me up from band practice." Mom scoffed. "We were busy. You were at Victoria's cheer tryouts." A flicker of guilt passed over Dad's face. He remembered. "She found me crying on the porch, Grandma. She wrapped me in one of her shawls and said, 'Don't worry, sweetheart. This house will be yours someday.' And you know what? I believed her. I turned to Victoria. I kept believing her even after you two shredded her will. Her eyes widened. You have no proof. I have footage. That did it. Victoria's face strained like someone pulled the plug in her soul. You're bluffing. I just tilted my head. Am I? You were always careless with angles. And Grandma? She was always 3 steps ahead of everyone. Mom slammed her wine glass down. You're just doing this to punish us. No, I said. I'm doing this to honor Grandma. You tried to erase her wishes. I brought them back. Dad finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Sweetheart, what do you want from us? I looked at him, then at the woman who birthed me, the sister who used me as a punchline for the last 2 decades. Nothing, I said. Not anymore. I stood, walked over to the fireplace, and placed the signed closing documents in front of the family portrait, the one Mom had framed after cropping me out of the original. I move in January 2nd. I said. You're welcome to drive by and see the renovations. Victoria opened her mouth again, but I cut her off. Oh, and by the way? Tell your firm that if I hear a whisper of a lawsuit, that video goes straight to the state bar. Pretty sure it's frowned upon to destroy evidence of a revised will. Especially when you're a practicing attorney. She didn't respond. Just sat there shaking. And for once, silent. Mom? She didn't say another word. Not when she stood, not when she grabbed her coat. She just walked out. Dad didn't move. Didn't follow. He just looked at me like he'd never really seen me before. Did she really leave it to you? He asked quietly. She did. And for the first time in my life, I think he believed me. 3 days later, I stood in the foyer of Grandma's house with a key in one hand and a contractor's clipboard in the other. Jake Martinez, local, trustworthy, about my age and more importantly, one of the few people who still called my grandmother Mrs. D, with the kind of reverence usually reserved for saints, was walking the perimeter. Foundation solid, he said, tapping a support beam with his flashlight. Needs a new roof, porch is half rotted, and this plumbing? Let's just say your water pressure might be ambitious. I nodded. Fix everything. Original colors, original layout where possible. I want it like she left it, but better. Just not HGTV ruined it better. Jake grinned. Old school. Got it. We got to work fast. I was living off savings now. The equity sale money was mostly gone between the purchase and the contractor deposit, and my freelance gigs were what kept the lights on. But I'd planned for that. For 7 years, I'd lived like someone making minimum wage in Manhattan. Now, every choice I'd made, every skipped brunch, every reused coffee filter, every rented movie instead of streaming subscription, made sense. Meanwhile, Mom and Victoria were melting down in real time. They didn't call. They texted. And when I didn't answer, they emailed. Legal threats. Emotional appeals. Accusations that I'd manipulated a dying woman, that I was sick, that I was unstable, obsessed. I ignored all of it. But when I got a call from a block number at 11:52 p.m., I let it go to voicemail, until I heard Aunt Paula's voice. She's threatening to go public, Paula said calmly. Said she'll tell the papers you forged the will. You didn't, I know that. But Jake, you need to be ready. She's angrier than I've ever seen her. I stared out the window at the house next door. Mrs. Chen's porch light was still on. I remembered being 7 and chasing fireflies in her yard while Grandma watched from her rocker with a glass of iced tea and a gentle smile. They can say whatever they want, I told Paula when I called her back. This isn't about them anymore. It's about finishing what Grandma started. There was a long pause then. Good. Because she would have hated what they tried to do. And then came the next blow. A certified letter from Victoria's law firm, hand-delivered to my apartment building by a very smug-looking courier. Claim of fraud, it said at the top. Demand for reinstatement of ownership interest. They wanted the house back. They wanted blood. They wanted to burn me down. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that I'd already prepared for this. 2 months ago, I'd filed for legal verification of the 2019 will with probate court, attaching Grandma's journal entry as a sworn affidavit. Mr. Hammond, now fully retired but not senile in the least, had given a statement confirming that a revised will had been delivered to the family and mysteriously lost before it reached his firm. The court date? Already scheduled. January 12th. And if they didn't back off before then, their names would be in the record. Under oath. Exposed. This wasn't just a personal battle anymore. It was war. January 12th dawned cold and gray, The kind of day that settled into your bones and whispered, "Nothing good happens in courtrooms." I sat on the wooden bench outside probate, tapping my foot while my attorney, Richard Chen, yes, Mrs. Chen's son, flipped through our neatly organized binder of evidence. "You're sure you don't want to settle?" he asked, eyes scanning my face. "Because I have a pretty strong indication they might be willing to walk away if you sign an NDA and agree not to press criminal charges." I didn't even blink. "No. I'm not giving them a clean exit. They set this fire, Richard. They can sweat in it." He gave me a slow nod. "Respect." Victoria and Mom arrived 10 minutes before our hearing, flanked by 2 lawyers from Victoria's firm who looked like they got paid in blood and blackmail. Mom wore a navy pantsuit and pearls, her power outfit. Victoria had her usual perfectly curated attorney face on, tight and expressionless, but I caught the flicker in her eyes when she spotted me. It was the look of someone realizing their opponent wasn't bluffing. The hearing itself was brief, just a preliminary proceeding to determine whether there was sufficient cause to investigate the legitimacy of the 2012 will versus the 2019 revision. My side presented the journal, the digital copies, and a signed affidavit from Mr. Hammond. Victoria's team argued lack of authentication, potential coercion, and that I had a financial interest in misrepresenting the facts. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and a demeanor that screamed, "Don't test me today, honey," listened patiently. Then she asked a single question. Why would a grandmother specifically name this granddaughter in a revised will, and that will mysteriously vanish, yet the house is sold before probate is even finalized? That doesn't strike me as standard practice. Victoria's lawyer flinched. Mom opened her mouth, then wisely shut it again. The judge continued, "Until we finish review, I'm granting a stay on any legal challenges against the property's current owner. No restraining orders, no transfer of deed, no lawsuits. This matter will be investigated thoroughly. Court reconvenes in 4 weeks. 4 weeks. Enough time to let the entire thing stew." When we exited the courthouse, Mom made a beeline toward me. "This is all revenge, isn't it? You're doing this to hurt us." I looked at her, really looked, and saw something raw underneath the rage. Not guilt. Not grief. Fear. "No," I said. "I'm doing this because Grandma trusted me. And because you burned that trust to the ground." Victoria grabbed Mom's arm. "Don't speak to her without counsel present. You're my mother," I said, voice steady. "And you tried to erase me." They turned and walked away. But this time, they didn't look so tall. When I got home that night, I found a small package in my mailbox, no return address, just my name in a familiar looping script. Inside was a key. Old brass, worn smooth from decades of use. And a note in Aunt Paula's handwriting. She hid the real will. She told me she didn't trust anyone else to keep it safe. I didn't understand why at the time. I do now. I found this in the back of her cedar chest last week. You'll know what to do." I stared at the key for a long time, my heart pounding. Because I did know what it was for. Grandma's secret cabinet. The one she always kept locked. The one she told me, as a child, was where all the important things live. I drove straight to the house, threw open the front door, and went to the study. The key slid in like it had never been away. Inside were letters, photos, legal documents, and at the very back, wrapped in a faded linen handkerchief, a signed, sealed, original copy of the 2019 will, with the official notary stamp still embossed. Game. Set. Match. The next morning, I walked into Richard's office with the will in a fireproof document bag and a paper cup of his favorite peppermint mocha. He looked at me, then at the bag, then back at me. "You found it," he said flatly. "I did." He didn't even blink. "I'm ordering a scan and forensic verification today. I'll also request an immediate evidentiary hearing. Victoria's gonna lose it," I muttered, sipping my own coffee. "She already did. Now she's just waiting for the paperwork to make it official." The court moved faster than I expected. Less than a week later, we were back in the same mahogany-paneled room, but this time, the tension was electric. Even Mom looked rattled. Her pearls were gone, replaced with a scarf and her 1,000-yard stare. Victoria had 3 lawyers with her now. One of them was sweating. Richard handed the judge the bag with white-gloved hands like he was presenting the Holy Grail. "Your Honor, we now have the original, notarized 2019 will. Retrieved from the personal effects of the deceased, authenticated by signature experts and verified through the official notary registry. It clearly and unambiguously states that the Maple Street property was to go solely to Jake. The judge flipped through the pages. You could hear the paper crackle. Victoria's lead attorney stood, trying to mount one last desperate defense. This still doesn't prove the will wasn't planted. The deceased was of advanced age and... The judge raised her hand. Counselor. The will is signed, witnessed, notarized, and now verified. I will be forwarding this case to the State Bar for review. As for the court's ruling, the 2012 will is null. The 2019 will stands. She paused, giving Victoria a look that could chip concrete. This hearing is over. Victoria didn't even look at me as she left the courtroom. She walked out like a statue. Head high, expression frozen, cracking just slightly at the edges. Mom trailed behind her like a woman carrying sandbags through a hurricane. Outside, I sat on the courthouse steps for a long time, holding the court order in my hands like it might dissolve if I looked away. Aunt Paula called me later that afternoon. So, she said, did the judge enjoy her reading material? She enjoyed it enough to validate a small act of rebellion from 2019. Dorothy always said a woman's legacy wasn't in what she left behind. It was in who she left it to. My throat tightened. I wish she could see this. She does. Trust me. That night, I returned to the house, my house, with a bottle of wine, a carton of Chinese takeout, and a stack of Grandma's old recipe cards. I made tea in her chipped blue kettle, sat at the kitchen table she'd always kept spotless, and let myself feel every bit of it, the rage, the grief, the vindication. I wasn't just some forgotten afterthought anymore. I was the heir. Not because of blood. Not because of duty. But because Grandma had seen me, really seen me, and chosen me anyway. And the war? It was over. But rebuilding? That had just begun. The community response came in waves. At first, a trickle, quiet nods at the farmer's market, a few neighbors dropping by with casseroles and cautious questions. Then came the full tide. People talked. Word got around about what happened. Not the tabloid version Mom and Victoria had tried to spin, that I was a greedy opportunist who manipulated a senile woman, but the real one. The girl who never stopped visiting. The one who remembered Dorothy not as a burden, but as a legacy. The one who bought the house when everyone else tried to forget it. Mrs. Chin from next door brought over a lemon pound cake and hugged me so hard I nearly dropped my keys. Your grandmother used to sit on that porch and tell me you'd change everything one day, she said. Guess she was right. Jake and his crew finished the structural restorations by mid-February. The porch was fully rebuilt, complete with that ornate spindle work Grandma loved so much. We found a hidden drawer beneath the old window seat, stuffed with handwritten letters, pressed flowers, and the receipts for nearly every piece of furniture Grandma ever bought. It was like discovering a map of her love. I framed a few of the drawings I found, floor plans, color swatches, garden sketches, and hung them in the hallway leading to the kitchen. I even kept the squeaky floorboard at the base of the stairs. Jake offered to fix it. I told him not to. It squeaked when I was 10, I said. Let it squeak when I'm 32. He laughed. You're a sentimental pain in the ass, you know that? I smiled. Blame Dorothy. Dad moved into the guest room in March. He showed up with 2 suitcases, an old camera bag, and a tentative smile. Still okay if I stay a while? He asked. Forever, if you want. We settled into a rhythm, shared breakfasts, Sunday grocery runs, evenings spent watching him try to remember how to play chess. He started taking photography classes at the community center and joined the local men's book club. He even made friends. Good friends. The kind that drink beer on porches and call you just to say, "Hey, did you see that game?" I caught him one night in the garden, photographing the roses with his reading glasses hanging off the tip of his nose. He looked up at me, blinking in the twilight. I haven't felt this, real in years. You are real, Dad, I said. You've just been living in someone else's version of you. He nodded, eyes glassy. I wish I'd known sooner. But you know now. Meanwhile, Victoria had gone eerily quiet. Not a word since the ruling. No follow-up legal letters, no half-baked threats. Just silence. Which, honestly, was almost more unnerving. I half expected a drive-by egging or a social media smear campaign. But nothing. Not even a forwarded passive-aggressive meme. And then, in late April, a box arrived at the front door. No return address. No note. Inside, a bundle of childhood drawings, a faded family photo of the four of us at Lake Arrowhead, and a book. The Secret Garden, Grandma's favorite, and mine. Tucked inside the cover was a sticky note in Victoria's sharp, familiar handwriting. I was wrong. I'm not ready to say more than that. But you were right about her. She saw you. I didn't. I'm sorry. I didn't cry. Not right then. I set the note down, closed the book, and stared at the photo. We looked happy in it, fake happy, the way families do when a camera's around. But it hit me, even that fake moment had value, because somewhere behind it was a truth none of us had the tools to reach. Maybe we still didn't. But this was a start. I mailed Victoria a photo of the porch. Just the porch. Fully restored, fresh paint gleaming in the sun, rocking chairs back in place. No note. Just a picture. Let her decide what it meant. Spring turned to summer with the ease of a sigh. Maple Street bloomed again, lilacs by the fence, Grandma's roses in full, fragrant rebellion, and sunlight that poured through the stained glass panels like melted gold. For the first time in over a decade, the house felt alive. I hosted my first garden party in June. Nothing fancy, folding tables from the community center, mismatched chairs, pitchers of lemonade and iced tea, and more potato salad than any sane human should eat. Aunt Paula brought lemon bars and wore one of Grandma's old aprons, tied backwards because she said it made her feel 20 years younger. Mrs. Chen cried when she saw the garden fully restored. Jake showed up with his wife and kids, one of whom brought a watercolor painting of the house that now hangs by the front door. Even Dad took photos the entire day like the proud house dad he'd quietly become. He'd started submitting his prints to local galleries and even got accepted into the downtown art walk. His photo of Grandma's tea set on the windowsill at sunrise won second place. You know, he told me that night as we cleaned up. Your grandma would have loved this. She's probably somewhere up there critiquing my flower arrangements. He laughed. And probably proud as hell anyway. I think he was right. By July, the house had become more than a home, it had become a hub. I turned Grandma's old sewing room into a design studio and started hosting small workshops. Teenagers, retirees, single moms, anyone who wanted to learn how to create something beautiful. One woman brought her 9-year-old daughter who spent the whole class sketching cartoon foxes. I hung one of her drawings on the studio wall. This is Grandma Dorothy, I told her, pointing to the portrait above the door. She's the reason we're all here. Was she an artist too? The girl asked. Yeah, I said, my throat tightening. She made this house. That counts. Victoria reached out in August. A real message, not a drive-by guilt trip or a veiled legal threat. Just a simple email with a subject line. Can we talk? I said yes. I figured if she was brave enough to ask, I could be brave enough to meet. We sat on the porch, the same one she once said should be bulldozed, and drank iced tea while the cicadas droned in the trees. I was angry, she said. I still am, if I'm being honest. But not at you. At who then? Mom. Myself. Everyone. She looked around the porch like she expected it to bite her. I thought I was doing what Grandma would have wanted, she continued. Managing things. Taking control. Making it efficient. Grandma didn't care about efficient. She cared about people. Victoria nodded. That's what I missed. I didn't see her as a person. Just an obstacle between me and the next thing. She paused. You didn't just save this house, Jake. You saved a part of her none of us understood. I didn't reply. There wasn't anything to say that wouldn't come out as a sob or a scream. And honestly, she didn't need my forgiveness. She just needed a place to start over. So I gave it to her. She left that night with a Tupperware container full of lemon cookies, my best approximation of Grandma's original recipe, still imperfect, but close. She promised to come back. I told her she didn't have to. She said that's why she would. And Mom? She hasn't spoken to me since the court ruling. I saw her at the farmer's market in September. She avoided my eyes and walked right past the stand where I was helping Mrs. Chen sell baked goods. But her cart was filled with fresh flowers. Roses. The same kind Grandma used to grow. It's not forgiveness. But maybe it's something. Today, I stood in the attic and opened the last box of Grandma's things. Inside was an old Polaroid of me on the porch, age 10, holding a glass of lemonade with a cookie in my other hand. Grandma beside me, laughing with her whole face. On the back she'd written, "He sees this house the way I do. He'll protect it." he'll fill it with life. I slipped the photo into a frame and hung it beside the front door. I'm not trying to win anymore. Not trying to prove anything. I'm just living the life Grandma gave me. And finally, it's enough.